people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. This has been truly an unusual week. I wished I had answers so that the world could get right again and take off the way it should be. And I thought, where am I going to come up with the answers? Right there. That is the answer. That is the answer. What was it Hazel said to me this morning? Something about the Bible. I'm going to church. I'm going to take my Bible. Bible? Church? Can that be? I think we do. We need to get into that book. More than that, we should live by that book. Not by the book of discipline, not by laws that run by the state, not by laws that run this country, but by this. If we follow this, everything else will follow along. You ever read that? Just like that verse that I just read. I also did something unusual this week, and I probably won't do it again while I'm here, is to have a message go over 2 weeks. And there's probably reasons for that, but one of the reasons I said was, we're going to be tired. And if you're tired and you're sitting in the pew, you'll end up like a lot of other people do, fall asleep. And I don't want Matt to fall asleep. No. But that's what happens. We get tired and we shut things off. And we shouldn't shut it off. Not because I got a brilliant message, but because God gave me the words to give to you. Just that simple. And it's neighbor to the man. Part 1. Minneapolis. Anybody been to Minneapolis? A couple people? So you're probably going to fall right into this message. Minneapolis is a cool city to live in more than one sense of the word. More accurately, in winter, it is what? Cold, right? Cold. I ought to have you all jump up and look out the window. I'm looking for the snow to rise here. And we're not in Minneapolis. But then, yeah, the 3 seasons, just like it is here in Maine. It's comfortable and pleasant. The city is blessed with numerous sparkling lakes within the city limits, plus a generous sprinkling of parks and playgrounds. And churches, particularly Lutheran churches. The heavy accent of Scandinavians in Minneapolis, or at least those of Scandinavian descent, brought forth early on in the city's history a lot of Lutheran congregations. Some for the Norwegians, some for the Swedes, and even some for the Danes. Those of German descent had their own style of Lutheran congregations as well. Most of those folks came from the old country, where the Lutheran brand of Christianity prevailed. Hence the large number of Lutheran churches of every brand and stripe. But Minneapolis has its CD also. it has its share of poor neighborhoods and trashy vacant lots, although many of those residents of the city cringe at just a bit when reminded of that. They would rather think of that city as clean and upright places. They would prefer to think of their rival city across the river, St. Paul, as being the seedy place. But then that argument has gone on for years without any noticeable conclusions. Henry Black. Henry Black had the misfortune on a Saturday afternoon to get acquainted with the seedy side of Minneapolis. Henry was a black man from a small town in Virginia where he taught in a small black college. In Minneapolis, for an educators' conference, he had been out on a stroll on Saturday afternoon, and he got a little bit disorientated in some of those confusion streets in what is called southeast Minneapolis. It's not really as southeast as it sounds. Only the natives call it that. And as Henry passed beside a weed-filled vacant lot and trying to get his bearings, a car full of white teenage thugs noticed him and stopped to tell him rather bluntly that he was in the wrong neighborhood. I'm attending an educators' conference at the university, he began. And I guess I got a little bit lost in my walk. Yeah, right, one of the toughs said. And I'm the governor's bodyguard. To which all of his buddies chuckled. Their intent was originally just to give the black man a hard time. But since they each had a few beers in them, the bad time got rather ugly. And before the toughs sped off in their car, they left Henry unconscious in the vacant lot, minus his billfold. Ivan and Doris Johnson often took a shortcut through this particular seedy neighborhood on their way to the Lake Cottage. And they were late this weekend getting there to the college because Ivan had been at his church all morning helping to take care of the large manicured lawn and the shrubs. Although he did the volunteer work somewhat willingly, he was a bit irritated this time because he was losing some valuable time fishing at the lake. A mild argument was in progress. It was only the sermon, for crying out loud, Ivan complained. Once again, they were discussing the congregation's particular participation in the World Hunger Program. And Doris was hoping to convince her husband that they needed to get serious about aiding in that effort. With grandson Bill newly confirmed, I'd like to have set up some kind of example, Doris pleaded. Ivan was lifelong Lutheran, as were his parents. Somewhat defensively, he said, well, I was confirmed too. I learned all that stuff in Swedish, I might add. And I could also recite some of it in my sleep. Reciting it in your sleep doesn't do a whole lot of good, does it? Doris knew instantly she should have said that. But she couldn't resist. Having acted as though he hadn't heard. And you know another thing that ticks me off? All those Vietnam people or whatever that our churches helped to get over here. First thing you know, those Asians are going to take over the whole America. Well, that's what Jesus tells us we're supposed to do. Bring in the strangers and aliens, isn't it? Doris said quietly. Oh, get off that Bible junk, Hammond said, with some exasperation in his voice. It was difficult to argue these things with his wife because she always has some of those Bible quotations or another to pass out. He wasn't sure it was fair way to argue. Look at our schools, he continued lamely. The top of the class is always an Asian, Vietnamese, or whatever. And the university here is overrun by all kinds of Asians. Our tax money is going to educate those foreigners. He was on a roll now. He was on a roll. And as they approached that seedy part of the neighborhood, Doris noticed the black man, Henry, lying in the weeds. Hammond, stop! There's a man lying there, and he looks like he might be hurt. I'm not going to stop in this neighborhood and probably end up getting hit over the head. But he was uncomfortable in his protest. Anyway, he's probably some wino sleeping off a drunk. They had slowed down for a stop sign, and Doris got a little closer to look at Henry. He doesn't look like a wino, Hammond. He's rather well dressed. I think he's been mugged. At least we should stop and call the police. Well, I don't see any place to call from, and besides, someone has probably already called the police. Let's keep moving. And they drove in silence until they reached their lake home nearly an hour later. Fishing wasn't all that enjoyable for Hammond and Doris. She couldn't get out of her mind the man lying in the weeds. Let us sing hymn number, what is it, 454?
454.
454. Stay tuned next week, part 2.